retirement in the U.S. is complicated, and I say it like that because I've done several of these for expats who've gotten divorced overseas, and their decree, the overseas lawyers don't know anything about our retirement accounts. So what happens is most of our employer-sponsored retirement accounts are usually what's called ERISA qualified. That means they're governed by federal law, ERISA.
Right.
Uh, uh, Employee Retirement Security Act. Anyway, it's from the 1980s, and uh, it requires certain specific requirements to divide the retirement without having any tax effect. So what it requires is what's called a Qualified Domestic Relations Order, also referred to as QDRO for QDRO. And
Right.
what the QDRO does is it tells the plan administrator to carve out a new account for the non-employee spouse and move this much money from the employee spouse's retirement to the non-employee spouse's carved out amount with no tax consequences, no penalties, no transfer fees. Well, no, I'm sorry. There is fees, but they're not very high. Fees to review the QDRO, but they're not taxes or penalties. Those are the big things. They do charge a fee to review the QDRO and process it. Um, so what people will sometimes do is, it doesn't happen often, but they will. I have had people come in who tell me, okay, we've got a whole agreement. This is our first visit, but we've got it all worked out. I'm giving my spouse X dollars in the 401k, and I already drew it out and handed it to them. And I say, okay, unless we there is a time limit during which the IRS says you can put that money back. I don't remember. I think it's about 180 days, but please don't rely on that. I'm not certain. I always look it up. But if we're within the time limit, we might be able to move the money back. If not, that person, the employee spouse, is going to get a 1099, and the IRS is going to come looking for a bunch of money for taxes and penalties for drawing it out early. By doing it with a QDRO, you do not pay those. So that's probably the most common mistake I see people make with retirement. It doesn't happen often because right now there's a lot on the internet about how to QDROs. The other thing is not getting the QDRO started early in the divorce. So a deal will be made, it's signed, it's done, and then they try to get the QDRO done after and find that the signed agreement, whether it's a court order or an agreement, doesn't include all the necessary provisions. And now we have to try to either reach agreement or reopen the case. And that can be very, it depends on this. Within Texas, it can be done. It just means you're basically reopening your divorce again, and nobody really wants to do that. It's not pleasant. You've got to serve your spouse. You've lost a lot of the negotiating leverage you had at the beginning or during the process. It's a whole different scenario. So I would say with regard to retirements is to have a lawyer who knows how retirement works and how QDROs work, because it's not just about how to write the QDRO. It's also when you're negotiating the division or presenting it to a judge, make sure the important things are highlighted and included in that division. And they vary plan to plan. It's really important. I have had cases with lawyers who do all kinds of work because they're helping a friend or whatever. And some of them were just not very nice people. So at the end of it, wasn't my job to tell them how to do it right. They were not very nice to me throughout the case. So they left with a decree, and I knew there were things undone that they didn't know they were supposed to do. I represent my client. And, if everything's smooth and everybody's getting along, I don't mind saying, hey, don't forget you need to do these things. Right. If they've been arrogant, talking down, or whatever the case may be, because they think they're smarter than everybody else, then I'm like, okay, good luck.